You memorized the Qur'an, but you forgot it. Now what? You spent so long memorizing and trying to repeat and bring these ayat into your head. And now you sit there and it's not even coming to you at all. Often people ask, how can I re-memorize portions that I've forgotten? And I'll show you in this video why this question has a faulty premise. I actually refuse the idea that anyone who's memorized something has to re-memorize it. Rather, we will term this kind of re-memorization in this video as revision. So how do you revise the Qur'an, and specifically, how do you revise it when you've forgotten a large portion of it? Now, this applies to hifdh and also those who are still memorizing the Qur'an and are struggling to balance between memorization as well as their past revision. But first, why should you spend your time, which is very, very, very valuable, on listening to me, and why, should you bother listening to me? Alhamdulillah, bifadlillah, I've been able to teach the Qur'an and also lead Taraweeh for the last 4 years. The method that I'm going to show you today is something that I've taught to my own students, as well as used in my personal life to lead Taraweeh, to be able to recall large portions of the Qur'an whenever I need to. I've also received ijazat in Asim and Hamza, and that's, coming from a person who completely was in a very difficult situation after they finished their hifdh. I didn't remember the majority of it. And within a few years, I was able to recite the Qur'an cover to cover to my sheikh. I've also researched the best study methods and used them in my own personal life. When I say study methods, I'm talking about the neuroscience behind learning. I've studied them, and I've applied them to not just this video, but other videos as well. I have a video on my YouTube channel on how to memorize the Qur'an with similar kind of foundational knowledge as this video. If you would like to watch that, feel free, it will be in the YouTube description, inshallah. Now, these study methods, I didn't just use them for the Qur'an, but I used them in other domains in my life, such as when I was in Cambridge studying there, working 50 to 60 hours in the library. I was able to use the same kind of study skills that I gained from the Qur'an in my secular studies as well. The first thing a person has to do is to familiarize themselves with the portion that they're learning. If, imagine, someone has completely forgotten just 30, the first thing they have to do is to first dip their toes in. And this is very important that we do not confuse this with repeating again and again and again, or what people like to call re-memorizing. What we need in this stage is to just have a surface level knowledge of the portion that you're trying to memorize. That means reading it with looking once or twice. Maybe you listen to it passively while going on your commute, while walking around. Personally, a big thing that I did after I finished my hifdh was to listen to the Qur'an continuously on repeat when I was, before I went to sleep, while I was walking to school, in school. All of these things I used to do when I just finished my hifdh. Now notice, I didn't say that you need to re-memorize, you need to repeat, because first of all, this is just a waste of your time. No one who's memorized something and put that memorization in their brain beforehand needs to, repeat to bring it back. Repeating is when you're doing something completely new for the first time, like when you first memorize the portion that you're talking about. You see, revision is more so about bringing ayat from the back of your brain to the forefront, meaning it comes more smoothly. And it's more so about remembering the order of ayat and the page structure, rather than repeating it again and again and again. Often people who repeat again with looking again and again, usually what they're doing is, one, they're wasting their time, and two, they're doing just the surface level. Like I said, we need to familiarize yourself with the portion that you're learning, but that's not the only step that we need to do. So a person has to understand that this step isn't the bulk of your revision. It's probably about 10% of your whole revision. I'd say 90% or 80%, the majority of your revision is from active recall. And this is the most important step in your revision. You have to really struggle and look away from the Qur'an and bring the ayat that you've forgotten to the forefront of your brain. Remember, you're not memorizing completely, from scratch. You've memorized it before. Your brain has seen this information before. It may be hazy. It may be, confused and jumbled up in your brain, but your brain just needs to sort it out. In practical terms, this means that you read without looking at the Qur'an until you can't continue. A couple of notices here is that a person needs to embrace making mistakes. Mistakes are good when it comes to learning, because without the mistakes, you won't learn quick enough. Often we think that just because we've made mistakes and we're making so many mistakes that this isn't for us, we need to just quit. And this mindset is why many people often, procrastinate their hifdh and say that I'll do it later, I'll do it when I'm, more free, when I have more time. This is taking far too long. When you accept that mistakes are part of your learning and this is how you learn and there is no other way that you will learn, you will improve far quicker. A practical way to recite the Qur'an without looking at it is to use apps like Tartil, to ask a friend to test you. This is a bit more difficult, of course. Tartil is there whenever you need to, whereas the friend or a family member is not always there and readily available whenever you need it. This is a little bit of a practical test for whoever wants to do it. This is an ayah that is specifically quite hard for myself. When I was memorizing this ayah, it was just a bit of a tongue twister. Surah Nahl is one of my most difficult surahs. It was my last ever surah that I memorized, which is probably why it was so difficult for me. The ayah is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ضرب الله مثلا عبدا مملوكا لا يقدر على شيء ومن رزقناه منا رزقا حسنا فهو ينفق منه سرا وجهرا هل يستوون الحمد لله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون. So this ayah, if you want to really test the ability to actively recall, is a good one because not many people know it. It's it's right bang in the middle of the Qur'an. Repeat it 10 times with looking. Pause the video if you need to. And when you're done, just look away. As soon as you've looked away, start to recite the ayah without looking. And suddenly you'll notice straight away that it's not as easy, of course. Now, the benefit of making mistakes, and in this specific example, you'll see that you'll make mistakes in certain areas. When you make these mistakes, they're very quick steps to diagnose where you're going wrong. Often people who revise, they don't actually know where their difficult parts are. A big thing that I did when I was revising after I finished my hifdh was to highlight pages or specifically words that I found difficult. And when I say highlight, I don't just mean underline. I mean, actually, I shaded in certain sections of the Qur'an over, pages that I found difficult. And it helped me pinpoint far quicker areas of weakness. Remember, when you're revising, you're not memorizing. You don't need to repeat everything again and again and again. You have certain things in your head already. Right now, it's all about realizing where your weak points are. And the only way you can do that is by actively recalling. Usually when a person is constantly looking at the page and reading, they just assume that they know it and they fall into a false sense of reassurance. And when you slip up, remember, it's good. So again, embrace the slip-ups, embrace the mental toughness and the maturity that is needed to embrace, obviously, the slip-ups. This is especially difficult when you're teaching young children who haven't faced the difficulties in life that maybe adults would have. Children often get demoralized when they see these mistakes because it's not easy. They can't do it. Even adults who have relatively easy lives aren't used to the mental toughness that is needed to keep coming back when you faced a certain amount of hardship. A good way to reduce the hardship of memorizing and revising the Qur'an is to use the Pomodoro method. Your brain often procrastinates and pushes off hifdh because it's too hard, it's too difficult. What I say to a lot of my students is to set yourself a certain timer. In this timer, you are going to finish off a certain goal. Maybe you want to revise 5 pages, half a page, a juz. In that timer, you set your goal and you will accomplish it within that time. After you've reached your goal, you reward yourself with a 5-minute break. You go and do whatever you want to do. You come back refreshed, ready to go again. I use this specifically more with children. Why? Because children need that kind of end goal in sight to be able to keep going. Often I'll teach a child and they're complaining, Ustad, it's too hard, I'm going to forget it. All of these excuses come to the forefront. But I know that as soon as they want to do it, it's done. I remember teaching a young child about the age of 7 where he was complaining and really saying that he can't do it. I said to him, if you can say this ayah with no mistakes in the next 1 minute, I'll give you a 5-minute break. Suddenly, the ayah was very easy. There was no mistakes done. Obviously, the same can apply for adults as well. We are adults, but we are basically children in big bodies. It's also important to reward yourself after you've done a long stint of revision. The reason why I say this is because in the mental toughness and the difficulty of revising, it's where the majority of people give up. They don't realize that if they just stand this out, they would have been okay. So when you do the tough things in life, make sure that your brain sees the end, first of all, like in the Pomodoro method, and also has a very tangible reward at the end of it. You know, if you were to teach a child, for example, you give them a sweet, or you maybe give them a break, or you give them a video game or whatever. These rewards are important for children, but you also as an adult are a child in a big body. You may be asking right now, when should I look? I can recite, maybe half a page and then I'm stuck. I can't carry on. The big principle here is you yourself know when you can no longer continue. And don't lie to yourself here. Be very honest with yourself in where your capabilities are. If, for example, you find yourself stuck, go back a bit, go back a few ayat. Often the majority of the ayat in the Qur'an have a certain structure and rhyme that your brain can just pick up on. Very often for myself, when I go back, and sometimes in Taraweeh, I literally was asked by one brother, why do you repeat ayat sometimes in Taraweeh? And the reason is because when I repeat the ayat, it's not because I'm trying to be emotional and, trying to make people cry behind me. It's because it helps me remember what's coming next. Sometimes, especially when you're leading Taraweeh, your mind just goes blank. Whereas when I go back maybe 1 or 2 ayat and come back, my mind just picks it up again. Remember, revision is about bringing the ayat that you know already from the back of your head to the forefront. Okay, maybe you've repeated the ayat, you've gone back a few ayat, you've come back maybe 5-6 times and it's still not coming. What do you do then? In these scenarios, you're allowed to look, but this look has to be very quick. Similar to how we familiarized ourselves with the portion that we were doing at the beginning. Remember, maybe reading it a few times, listening to it. We do the same thing for a specific section or an ayah. You look at it just enough to recognize it, and often maybe even one word is enough. When you've seen that one word and you've got enough to know which ayah is next, you recite the ayah, but before the ayah is finished, you repeat the whole portion again. Example, a person is reciting one juz and they're revising one juz. They make a mistake on the second page. They make the mistake, they can't continue. They read the ayah, then they go back to the beginning of the juz. Going back to the beginning, they recite again, they come back to the second page, and by that time, they would have forgotten it already. And this is a big, indicator of how much you need to struggle. Usually when you don't struggle, as in when we looked at the page, it is very easy. And like that, it goes very easily as well. Whereas if you had struggled, and you'll see this when you do eventually try this for yourself, you'll see that the struggle is what made the portion stay stronger in your brain for longer. So the person reciting or revising the juz goes to the second page, they will struggle because it was too easy for them when they looked at it. And by making it, by struggling in that way, they make it stronger in their head. So they come back to the second page, they're still umming and ahhing, but eventually it comes to them because it was in such a short period. Then they continue. When they make the next page, say they go to the 4th page and they made a mistake on the 4th page, they can't continue. They look at it, then they close it, go back to the beginning, repeat from the 1st page of the juz, then they go to the second page. Remember where they first made their first mistake. The second page again, still a bit weak, but it's not as weak as it was in the beginning. They struggle a little bit, but not as much as in the beginning. Then they smooth it out, the ayah in the second page, they come to the 4th page again, and again, they've forgotten a little bit because it was too easy. They struggle, they continue. The same thing happens throughout the whole portion. You reach a mistake, struggle. When you don't find it, you look at it, which is too easy, then you close it. You go back to the beginning, again, come back to the mistake, struggle and continue. Like this, you continue and you revise until eventually you've made the whole portion strong enough. What is very important here is that you do not continue after you've looked at the answer, basically. Looking at the answer is cheating. You're cheating and you're lying to yourself, giving yourself that assurance that you know it, when in reality, you really don't. If a person continuously looks into the Qur'an, they will fool themselves into thinking that they memorized it. When you've done this method of sifting through different mistakes in the pages that you've memorized, you finally come to a place where you can recite the portion continuously, but with a few kind of ums and ahs and a few pauses here and there. This is the optimal state to be in. Often this is where people think that they've done enough, but it's still not enough. Give yourself some time to relax after you got the portion into your brain. Maybe a few hours later you come back. When you've come back, you need to continue actively recalling it. The more you actively recall something, the easier it gets. I want you to think about the last time you read the Baba Black Sheep. A person, if you ask them, or even if you sing Baba Black Sheep, they can continue the whole thing until the end. The same thing with Surah Fatiha. The majority of the Muslims, they can recite Surah Fatiha without any mistakes. If you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen to a person, they can continue all the way to Waladdallin. But notice, when was the last time you actually opened the Qur'an, put your finger underneath each letter and read Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen? I don't remember for myself when the last time I did that. I probably have never ever done that. Same thing with Baba Black Sheep. I don't remember ever actually reading Baba Black Sheep as something that I read. Rather, it was something that you listened to maybe or read once, and eventually you actively recalled it. Now, these kinds of things that we've memorized, we don't actually realize how we've memorized them so well, such that by the time a person is 80, 70 years old, for something that they've listened to years back, they can still remember it. The same thing applies to when you're revising the Qur'an. The more you keep coming back and actively recalling it, not looking at the Qur'an, but reading it without looking, the better and the stronger it stays in your head. A summary. Make sure that you look first. Familiarize yourself with the portion. Often a person may have completely forgotten what they've memorized, but by looking at the page a few times, it comes back into their heads. Make sure you look away. This isn't something that I've learned just from neuroscience and the books that I've read on neuroscience and learning, but also something that I've seen from my sheikh himself. I was shocked when I learned this, that he revises 3 ajza every single day while walking to the masjid. When he first told me this, I was shocked. I was like, how are you able to do that? That is, superhuman. But having, gone ahead with his kind of method and manhaj, eventually it made sense to me why he was able to do that and why it eventually is easier for the person to revise in such a way. When you look inside the Qur'an to correct yourself, make sure that you start from the beginning. The reason why I say this is because by starting from the beginning, not only are you clarifying previous mistakes you've made, meaning ironing them out so that they're no longer as difficult, you're also giving yourself enough time such that you forget the answer that you've looked at. When you've forgotten it, you are able to struggle more, and you're not fooled into thinking that you really have memorized this portion. You're completely aware of the situation you're in. And by being aware, you're able to very quickly, rectify it. You must also consistently and actively recall. When things are easier, it doesn't mean that the work stops there. You must keep coming back and actively recalling it throughout your day-to-day lives. And this is where the best hifdh are made. They make their habits based around the Qur'an. Their salawats are, prayed with long surah. They are walking to school on the bus. They're revising the Qur'an. They're reciting the Qur'an in sleep sometimes. These kinds of things. This is where the strong person, where their hifdh is very strong, a person with their hifdh being very strong, is created. And of course, that means that you have to set yourself daily portions to recite and actively recall. If you're interested in making the habits of a hafidh something that's ingrained in your life, we're running a 30-day challenge. This challenge is designed specifically for those who are finding it difficult to recite the Qur'an at the same time and being able to stay consistent in their revision and memorization as well. If you're interested in actually implementing this kind of methodology and consistency in your life, then check out the link in the description below.